สวัสดีทุกท่านอีกครั้งครับขอต้อนรับทุกท่านเข้าสู่งานเสวนาในช่วงบ่ายนะครับเรายังคงมีหัวข้อเสวนาที่น่าสนใจต่อเนื่องและเข้มข้นตลอดทั้ง3เวทีเลยครับและนอกจากนี้นะครับถ้าเกิดท่านใดนะครับสนใจจะเยี่ยมชมพิพิธภัณฑ์ธนาคารแห่งประเทศไทยนะครับสามารถติดต่อได้นะครับที่เคาน์เตอร์ห้องสมุดชั้น2ครับ
So welcome all back again here in the afternoon session. Next session will be about the standard and interoperability, whether they are the key drivers for FinTech. But before getting started with the session, all the audience are welcome to send your questions for the panels by easily scanning the QR code being shown on the screen, so the moderator can see all the questions.
ครับในงานเสวนาต่อไปนะครับจะกล่าวถึงมาตรฐานการเชื่อมโยงระหว่างผู้ให้บริการทางการเงินรวมมาถึงมาตรฐาน QR code ของประเทศไทยในปัจจุบันครับ
So this session we have a great honor from the Executive Vice President. He is a head of business innovation from Kukkong Thai Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Suvicha Sudchai.
Hello, and welcome to the afternoon session. This is probably the hardest session because, well, there's no water. Some condensation going on here. Hardest session because, first of all, it's right after lunch, right? So I think everybody is feeling sort of droopy and tired and falling asleep, but it's okay. I think we're gonna have a lively session today from a lot of the speakers that are pretty well knowledgeable in terms of interoperability, standardization. We're going to have panelists coming from all over the world. I think the advancement of technology in this stage, in this phase of the world, I think it's driving a lot of discussions, even from banking standpoint as well as from fintechs, who are trying to scale and who is trying to connect and integrate with banks, right? So I think the importance of standardization and importance of interoperability becomes imminent in terms of how we use the data. We heard from the governor this morning talking about 3 key drivers, right? That the regulators are moving towards. One being productivity, right? So how do we drive productivity in the banking industry and across Thailand? And the second one is immunity. We're going to be touching upon immunity a little bit in terms of how do we drive for the immunity of data, right? And the third thing is inclusivity. So that's how do we use the data in terms of opening up to the people or the unbanked, and then drive the inclusivity of the unbanked and SMEs. So without further ado, I think let me introduce our panelists. Who will be joining me on stage to give you a little bit more detail and to discuss with me on how do we actually do some of these standardization and how do we drive interoperability around banks and financial sectors and fintechs. In the discussion, this is the panel discussion 3, so standardized and interoperability key drivers for fintech. Let me first welcome Mr. Buncha Manoonkunchai, Senior Director, Financial Technology Department, Bank of Thailand. On stage, please. And the second person, Mr. Kukkong, Ruckphaopunt, EVP, Executive Vice President, Technology Division, Bangkok Bank. On stage, please. And the third person, Mr. Ben Gilbey, Senior Vice President, Digital Payment and Labs, MasterCard. And last but certainly not least, Mr. David Lee Heyman, IBM Mobile API Economy Leader, ASEAN. All right. All set here. So let me start off, since I think when we talk about standardization and interoperability, I think the number one key question, right, that I think most of you have in mind is that what is the regulator think about that? The clickers, right? So let me start off by getting to the point, right, and ask our regulator, the only one and only on stage here today. So let me ask Kun Buncha, what is your viewpoint as a regulator, right? In terms of standardization and interoperability, how would that strengthen our financial infrastructure in the financial sector, especially in this FinTech landscape?
Thank you, Imers. And before answering your question, probably I have to say that in the FinTech sphere, when people talk about regulator, they seem to be kind of afraid of. But I just want to make some change on that because the regulator right now is not just the opposite of the world, but we are in the world and we are in collaboration with when the technology going forward. And I just like to pinpoint that there's some initiative fostering the innovation in Thailand, and many of you may have heard of it. First of all, I'd like to touch upon the National e-Payment Master Plan, which is the master projects on infrastructure that we have been implementing so far. The project that many of you may have heard and already well known of it, which is the Pompeii payment system. This is a quite infrastructure that built like the base infrastructure that the new feature, for example, like the QR code standard, can be used upon this kind of standard. The second, the card expansions and the e-tax system, government e-payments, and literacy and promotion. With all these kind of projects, you may have known that up to now, we have reached 39 million ID have been registered through the Pompeii system, which is quite a significant number. It's more than half our citizen population in Thailand. And you can see from the slide that on the right-hand side that we have introduced the standard QR code, which is we have launched it in last year, in August, which we have in collaboration with the international standard, international network, like all of the Visa, MasterCard, UnionPay, JCB, American Express, all collaboration with all Thai bank and all the non-bank payment industry. We all join hand and we introduced our first Thai QR code standard, which is had launched and introduced to the country last year. And you can see the initiative, for example, like we just make an announcement on the Thailand blockchain community, which is our first blockchain community. Everyone mentioned that the blockchain can turn into our future of internet. We can't deny that. You have observed that in several countries. And the use case by using the blockchain has variety of use. And the National Digital ID platform, which is quite a very significant project that's going on in Thailand right now, is kind of open the door for the digital banking service and all the digital payment. And it's just a way that we can also use the blockchain technology to be our infrastructure on the National Digital ID platform, which is going to unlock our potential in terms of variety of use case in our economies. And last but not least is a standard and open API, which you can Tom, our moderator, have touched upon, which is I'm quite certain that in the future, the way that we can connect, the way we can make the system to system connect efficiently, effectively, is going to be through the API. So the standard of API is quite going to become more and more important. Maybe the other speaker we will mention on that. I just touch a little more on the API gateway or hubs. It's going to become a little more important because since we have lots of APIs going on, we have varieties of standard, varieties of interoperability, but how could we connect them together so that we need some kind of gateway, we need some kind of hub that can help the lowest to develop the API standard faster, quicker, and into a single gateway, a single hub. The other point that I just, all right.
So no, I'm just going to ask, since you touch upon those points, is that what are some of the key involvements from which probably lead into this discussion, right? This slide in terms of the sandbox. But what are some of the key involvements that BOT is driving, was helping this whole financial innovation?
Thank you, thank you very much. As I just a little bit mentioned to you that the Bank of Thailand as a regulator right now, our role is not just to stabilize or making sure that all risks have been taken care of, the financial stability had been taken care of, but also to promote technology to address the efficiency of the system, to address the risk management to the system, and ensure that the consumer have been well protected. You can see that we have been introduced in Regulatory Sandbox for about a year and a half, something like that. This is a testing area for innovation for financial service, which can leverage on any technology. We are quite neutral on technology with accommodative regulation within limited environments. You can see the three main objectives of our Regulatory Sandbox is promoting financial innovation that are first key. The second, we want to make sure the consumer had their right to be protected and contain acceptable risks. And right now, our sandbox technology has been discussed with us, and many of them has been put in the sandbox testing environment with like a blockchain, the biometric, the standardized QR code, and machine learning, and also the big data. The use case has been a variety of it. I just put a little on here as a QR payment, document authentication, like LG, for example, and also biometric authentication, money transfer. All of those use cases have been put on the sandbox. And I just want to make sure that, and for all of you to have known that when we're driving the sandbox is just an experimental places. We don't want the regulation to block the technology. We don't want everyone to sit and wait until we issue our regulation and leading the technology, that's not the right way. But the better way is that we walk hand in hand with industry, and we walk hand in hand with all stakeholders. We work together, and then we can have the business rules going on, and we have standards have been implemented, and all of the stakeholders can driving toward the same direction, and that make the real impacts on our project. Thank you, Tom.
So I think the key word from this slide is the that's bolded on top here, which is the new technologies, right? So the sandbox that Kun Buncha is talking about is really driving and facilitating the new technologies that are coming in, right? So that our banks can then test and FinTech can test out some new technologies. So discussing and on that note. In terms of new technology and in terms of innovation and interoperability, let me turn the table to sort of experts from the global point of view, right? To see, so how are you seeing, the importance of standardization globally, right? From the MasterCard and from technology standpoint, what are some of the key learnings or benefits of doing standardization? What are some of the things that you've seen, and what are some of the technologies that you've seen in the past? And going forward, what are some of the key trends in the world?
If you don't mind. So this is not the most fascinating subject for many people, I must say, standards and interoperability, but it's incredibly important. It's incredibly important to our industry in terms of payments and financial services because, number one, it enables scale. Number two, it enables interoperability. And interoperability is fundamental. It's not just in our industry, but in other industries as well. Imagine if you were a mobile phone user and I was on one network and Kun Tom was on another network, and we were unable to call each other or unable to send each other messages. That would be disastrous and a massive inhibitor to scale. So the same applies to the payments and the financial services business as well. We have to have standards, we have to have interoperability, because that is the way that we get to scale, both on a domestic frame, but also increasingly on a cross-border or international frame. As customers, as users travel from one market to another, they expect and demand the same experiences when they make payment, whether they're doing it here in Bangkok, whether they're doing it in London, or whether they're doing it in Singapore. And that's enabled through standards. Now, as the payment business, we leverage EMVCo standards, which we just spoke about a little bit. And we've had some great successes with in leveraging EMVCo standards. One example is chip or NFC standards on contactless cards, contactless devices, and contactless terminals. Now, this enables a customer from Thailand to take their contactless plastic and use it now in Singapore to ride the metro, ride the MRT in Singapore, just with a tap at the gate, without having to have a specific piece of plastic or buy a separate ticket. They can just use their MasterCard, their Visa card, their American Express that is contactlessly enabled to travel that system in the same way that they can use it at any retailer that accepts chip or accepts contactless. Another good example of how we've come together and as an industry through EMVCo is actually tokenization. Tokenization is the replacement of that 16-digit number that's printed on your piece of plastic with a token, and a token that is cryptographically encrypted. So it's very, very hard to crack. This improves the security vastly for all, in particular, e-commerce transactions. And this is a great example of how EMVCo standards helped all of us as an industry come together. And another great example that we just touched on as well was QR standards. In China, right now, there are 2 QR standards that have been promulgated, one by Alipay, one by WeChat Pay. They're not interoperable, they're proprietary. And you can only imagine if that situation was perpetuated and indeed expanded upon. So you've got players in China like Dianping, Meituan, who are now implementing QR code with loyalty embedded. Now imagine you went to a merchant and you had an Alipay QR and a WeChat Pay QR and a Meituan QR and a Dianping QR, and then you had a MasterCard QR and a CUP QR. You would get what we're calling QR fatigue. There's actually a word for it. It means you're tired of the number of QR stickers and you can't actually see the merchant because it's covered in QR. So through EMVCo, what we've done now is we've distilled this down, and all the schemes have agreed, and national regulators, in their wisdom, Bank of Thailand being one of them, have agreed to adopt one standard QR code that is interoperable amongst all schemes. So just a few examples there. There is a third example that is being that will start to be rolled out later on this year, which is around 3DS 2.0 authentication. This is a replacement from that horrible SMS that you get when you're doing e-commerce transactions. This is a much smoother, much more mobile-first experience that works natively when it's in apps. It can work through your mobile banking application. It can leverage biometrics, whether that's fingerprint or Face ID. And of course, it's also risk-based. So if I'm a merchant, and I don't see much risk in a transaction, I can choose not to step up on the authentication and let the transaction go through without having to require the user to do anything. Better experience for the user, much better for the merchant because they're not going to get abandonment of transactions because the transaction is just too difficult, and better for the issuer as well, the card issuer, because again, the transaction will go through and it's a better consumer experience. So just some examples of how the industry overall are leveraging standards to make sure that we provide better user experiences, that we improve the overall commerce landscape, and that we drive interoperability and scale. With that, David, I'll pass on to some other examples of standardization as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So David, and well, let's get some technical details into this. So how is that made possible in terms of technology, in terms of technological trend and things that you've seen across the world?
Sure. So, the types of things that we're seeing are banks were driving a common language of APIs, right? And once I have a common language of APIs from a bank, we really enable the banks, the FinTechs, and other players to really focus on the important thing, which is the experience of the end user. Now, that end user might be a consumer. The end user, as we heard this morning, right, a lot of focus on SMEs and on micro entrepreneurs. And the ability for me to develop an application, develop a new service, and know that all the banks are going to be able to support it, right? Across Thailand and across the region. So, I mean, these are the types of things that clearly can help. Some of the things that are required for that are, of course, the regulator pushing specific regulations and also driving, the banks and other players to really open up those APIs. We need to take into account the security, the privacy aspects, and generally, we're going to talk, a little bit later about also the speed of how do I make sure that my infrastructure is all ready for the onslaught of new transactions that will be coming along.
And so from that aspect, so who are some of the leaders, or who should be the leaders in driving some of the adoption and these type of standardization and interoperability across that you've seen across the world? Who are the main leaders in that space?
So if we take a look at what's happening with Europe with PSD2, right? So the ability to have interoperability, the ability to open up the data to players that are outside of, for instance, banks, has been there for a very long time. There's a reason that PSD2 came about. It came about because at the end of the day, most institutions are very used to protecting information, right? Not opening it up so that others can use it, not leveraging it as a platform that others can leverage as well. And so I think that the regulators are really key because what's happened in Europe is that regulators have mandated that all banks, all institutions must open up that data. Now, this morning in the first panel, there was a comment about, well, we can't just, let anyone give access to the data. So what we see is that in Europe, that openness of the data has really come hand in hand with privacy. It's really come hand in hand with GDPR, right? And those two things have to exist together. Anyone here have a Facebook account by chance? Anyone? Okay, so every time that you go into Facebook and you see that someone sends you a survey that says, what are the top 10 places you've been, and you go in, you fill it out, and you say, wow, this is really great. I've been to the best places in the world, and it says, can I share this on your Facebook? And you're like, yeah, sure, go ahead, and you give that approval, right? Now, what you're actually doing is you're giving approval to the developer of that particular, survey to actually access your data. Now, those same technologies are the technologies that are being leveraged when looking at PSD2, when looking at implementation of fine-grained, permission-based authorization of entities in order to use your data, right? And so, by leveraging that fine-grained, permission-based permission to use your data together with APIs and together with openness, you're able to drive that protection while enabling people to build new platforms and to focus on the experience.
Okay, so thanks for the view of the global and the world. Let's bring it back to local. Let's talk to Kun Kukkong a little bit. He seems a bit lonely now that I've been talking to other. So on the supply side, right? So in terms of, you're sitting up here representing sort of the whole banking industry in Thailand, right? So which is the supplier of the information, supplier of the data that needs to be interop, towards the fintechs or the people that need the data. We discussed this morning that in terms of data privacy is one of the key main issues. So in terms of, in your view, right? So what is the directions in terms of building that infrastructure and supporting the interoperability to those fintechs?
Actually, if I were a fintech, I would like to know what can I use on the banking infrastructure that said to be open and have a standard. So I would like to say something about the how the fintech can use our standard and infrastructure to build their own product or solution to their customer. First thing is about the supply chain. If you are the fintech in the supply chain area or doing the supply chain financing, you should look at the ISO 222. This is, we have the National Payment Message Standard, which is called NPMS since 2011 already. And the trend now is that in the future, all the payment message will be moved to ISO 222. So this is the first thing that FinTech should use if they would like to have to build a system or solution for the customer. Another thing is on the digital payment. If you do the digital payment like e-wallet and you offer e-wallet to your customer, you have to look into our open infrastructure, which is the Pompeii service. You might think that Pompeii is only for bank customer. No, from the design, we design the Pompeii as an infrastructure. We don't design the Pompeii as a banking product or service. We design it as infrastructure. So it means that it's an open infrastructure for FinTech to use. You can use your e-wallet to run on or make a payment or do the transfer on the Pompeii infrastructure. Another one is the very popular one that quite surprised us is the QR code. Actually, this one happened after we launched Pompeii. As the first time, we thought that the Pompeii should be enough for Thai people to do the fund transfer and payment. And then the Bank of Thailand one day have a meeting to us that, you see the WeChat Pay, Alipay coming to Thailand with all sort of the QR code. What can we do with it? So we brainstorm it together and say that, we have to have our own QR code, you know. And by that time, I think a couple of banks are going to issue the QR code product. And also we have, that we already have the BOT QR code as well. So we think that if we want to counter back the QR code from China, what can we do? And we also learn from our partner, Visa, MasterCard, and CUP suggest that we already have the EMV code standard. Why not you consider to use this standard? Because with this standard, you don't have the problem of so many QR code at the merchant. So we have a group together and come up with the Thai QR code standard. So if you look at this one is not for the bank. It doesn't mean that our bank own the QR code and only one can issue the QR code. This is offered to FinTech and non-bank as well. So just say that this whatever we do, we not just do the closed loop on among the banks. We try to open to all the party. Another thing is account management. This one is more on the PSD2. We're going to do the open banking API specification. Even though this one is kind of like work in progress, it's not coming up yet, but this is the trend. It should be in the near future, depend on the Bank of Thailand. This is more on the what if you are the FinTech. This is a RegTech. Is the new thing that come up from the regulation. Okay, and I think right now most of the bank try to build the open API infrastructure first. So we should have the solid infrastructure first to test out the security, the reliability, whatever. And then when we ready, the Bank of Thailand might come up to us that please come up with the standard so everyone can use your API. Okay. Another one is smart contract. If you do the smart contract right now, you should follow the Thailand blockchain community, which just announced at noon today. So this is going to the big thing to FinTech, because if you can follow the Thailand blockchain standard, when you come up with the smart contract, it will be easier for you to sell to your client or corporate client to adopt and use it. So on the bank side, we're going to do the letter of guarantee first. But this is not just for the letter of guarantee. It's for everything that you can put into the smart contract. Okay. The last thing is this thing everyone waiting for is customer identification. As you know that the fintech don't have the brick and mortar to onboard the customer. You rely on the digital channel to get to know your customer and touch the customer. So this one, the customer identification on the National Digital ID platform will help a lot on fintech for you to onboard customer with KYC. So if you can onboard the customer with KYC, so you can do a lot more things and not going to go to jail or whatever with you have problem with the AML later on. So this is an interesting platform. Also, even though National Digital ID platform might come from the bank going to be what you call the IDP or whatever, but it doesn't limit the non-bank or fintech to join in or utilize this platform.
So touching upon the national digital ID a little bit, I think if I don't know if everyone in here understands or knows about this sort of platform, but if this is the first time I've heard of this, right, I'd be scared, right, because of the information and the my everything about me. Maybe it's everything, maybe not. But I think can you maybe elaborate on what are some of the things that that I would be, as a citizen of Thailand, right, expected on this national digital ID platform?
Actually, you should come tomorrow to hear more about this from the people that write this national digital ID. Yeah. But in short, this one is quite secure. Bank of Thailand have a lot of level of authentication, and also actually they raise up the security when we onboard the customer, even face to face. If you're going to later on, if you going to onboard to the fintech via digital channel, and when you come to bank with the face-to-face, Bank of Thailand also raised the authentication that ask us to do what face recognition. We cannot look at the people and compare with eye to their ID anymore. You have to have a technology to do the face recognition. So that you should not scare, but you should be confirmed that whatever we do, it will be secure, and we don't want to have the case of Kun Nisha in the future, whether she come to online or offline.
She can open the bank, 7 banks at just 1 hour.
Yeah. So certainly this is one of the key examples of the use of sandbox, right? So since this is being implemented with the new technology, then in terms of BOT, Kun Buncha can attest to that this will not go out to masses unless it's passed sandbox first, right? So that's to ensure. From your view, David, so what's
So a few years ago, I met with essentially the CIO of Estonia. And Estonia has been one of the leaders in national ID for quite a long time, right? And one of the keys for them was that the regulations in Estonia are such that if anyone were to try to access the information leveraging that ID, there are very, very strict penalties. So in the first panel this morning, we talked about, okay, well, privacy laws, what happens if I violate them? Are there court cases? Are people actually following through with that, right? And I think that what Estonia has done is made sure that they're really following through. And it's led to, if we look at productivity and things of that nature, Estonia feels that it's an increase in 2% GDP per year because they've moved everything to that national ID. And so, obviously Thailand is a much larger country than Estonia, and it'll drive returns much more than in Estonia.
As I understand it today, right, I can just go to the Estonia government website and get a e-citizenship of Estonia today, right?
Yep.
That's good. So let me go get one today. So coming back to regulators, I think there's a lot of discussion in terms of success stories of this the Pompeii QR code in Thailand. So let me ask Kun Buncha, can you please share the impact of this type of magnitude of standardization in Thailand?
Thank you very much. Actually, Kun Kukkong has touched a little bit on how we can get the Thai standards. When we think about how we have to make a strategic retail payment, Kun Kukkong already mentioned we already have a national e-payment at that time. But what we're facing is that if we only have the EDC as a tool to penetrate, you can imagine that the EDC has some limitation when you're talking about the SME, you're talking about the lower end segment. So we have to think about, we look at around in the other country, you already mentioned in China, they are quite mainly use the QR code penetration. And we observe the China and India. India may be the first country who try to standardize the QR code, but India has already standardized with the 3 international brands at that time. We have come up and we think that how can we make some kind of tool which is cheap, which is efficient, and it is secure, that we can build the ecosystem and enhance competitiveness capability for sustainable Thai financial system, so that we put some kind of our strategic standard QR code on the spot at that time. And we think that this is a very important mechanism for payments for both physical and online store in the future. We already observed that the EDC cannot penetrate the online. We know that the online payment has struggled, all the costs, all the fraud, things like that. We think that all of those is demanding for some kind of standard. That's why we so-called the standard to serve the broader demand domestically and also internationally. And Kukkong mentioned that we make it open platform that can support varieties of source of fund. That's very the key. Is it the key? How can we make sure that this instrument, it can support all types of funding? It has to serve, right? When we think about the bank account, when we think about the card, we think about the mobile payment. How can we make sure that just one single tool that can bring everything to just one sort of QR code? That's the good thing. That's the key point. And how can we make the QR payment for the middle and the lower market segment? In developing country, we all struggling around how can we make the lower end, those kind of segment, they all use cash. And cash is very cheap. How can we bring the cost lowest as possible? That's very strategy. That's why we introduced the standard QR code at that time. You can see that by joining hands with all the 5 major card payment network and the Thai payment service provider, bank, non-bank, and we joined hands and we announced on the 30th of August 2017 last year that we unveiled the standardized QR code. And by that time, luckily we had the EMV code, and we've been working with that long before we announced on that August. And you can see on the left-hand side of yours that after we released the standards, the bank and non-bank can join. And you can see that the QR code standard even penetrate to the motorcycle taxi. They just hang the QR code on their badge. And they don't have to change for the coin. They just sit in a motorcycle and just scan the QR code. That's it. And the other use case you can see that probably the street vendor. They just use the QR code and the scan. And it's cheap. It's almost no cost because we built upon the Pompeii system. So that the Pompeii is an infrastructure, but the QR code is got the door. We put the door on each merchant. You can see the wet market, which is almost the street market, which is everyone can imagine that the QR code can penetrate to the wet market. They all use cash, right? And shops and shopping malls, all of those kind of types of merchant, they are all using the same QR code. And also that we make the Thai QR code standards. We try to standardize it. You can see from the pictures that we try to make sure that this is more or less at every one QR code. All 5 major international scheme is over there. All the Thai local card scheme is there. The bank, non-bank, they're all there. No need to fight. You're just there. One single QR code, just hang. No more lining up QR code and try to have to choose which one is our application. You don't have to worry about that. You just put up your mobile phone from any mobile applications, from bank and from non-bank, and make sure you have see the logo of Thai QR code, and you just scan. You just pay. And it's secure because all bank servers over there. It's almost any mobile application. The multiple source of funding, you can even use your banking account, you use a credit card, you can use debit card, or even the e-wallet. And all merchants can take it because it's low cost. And it's open. I told you it's open because the Pompeii system is open infrastructure. That's why we can make these things is open too. Last but not least, I just want to make sure that this is a one good example of how we bring the standard and help pushing the industry, help pushing the economy toward national e-payment, and we make sure that this is the coordinated effort. That if we coordinated work together, we can make the QR code spread throughout the country. The governor has already mentioned during the press release that we make the QR code spread more than 1 million physical shops with less than 6 months in Thailand. And if we combine it with the online merchant, it may have reached almost 2 million after online and offline merchant, which is a huge, significant number of it. We can make use of it. And you know, when we bring all of the information into the online, what does it represent? Next, in the future, we can gather all of those payment data directly from the shops. So in the future, we can utilize those kind of information, for example, like the information-based lending, right? If we don't have this, how can we get the data from the shop? And all of those SME shop, all of those street vendor, they don't have the collateral. How can they get the access to the fund, right? If we don't have this kind of tool, how can they make financial activity? So this is going to be the foundation, and this is going to be the data, and it's going to be the next future of our banking sector, financial sector, the non-banking sector, to base this as a data crucial informations so that they can build upon this in the future. Other innovative products can build upon this. For example, I mentioned to you the alternative credit scorings can conduct it on the payment innovation. And all of those kind of, what I can say is like a virtual supply chain. We can build the virtual supply chain along the side of the payment scheme. That's another facilitating to those kind of innovation that's going on with using the standard and come with the interoperability.
So in this success case, it is a very good success case, being launched since towards the end of last year. But what are some of the challenges that, from the regulator's perspective, that you've seen from being zero to now over 1 million? What are the key challenges that you see?
I think the most challenging story that we observe is that we have to make sure that all stakeholders, bank and non-bank, they share the same business rule, they share the same standards. We invite them, please come and have a seat, put them in the room, and come up with common business rules together, which is the rule for everyone, not just the rule that the regulator has been put in place. No, we don't dive that way. We bring everyone, sit on the same table, discuss what's our key challenges, what we have to do, what standard we have to put in place, put everything in the business rule, which is acceptable for everyone. So that I think that's the key challenge, the most challenging story that we have been pushed through.
Thank you. So, Kun Kukkong, what is the lessons learned by implementing this whole, standard QR code, as well as, what are some of the key challenges that banks faced in implementing this in Thailand?
Okay. So let me go to my slide a little bit. Okay, on the lesson learned when we developed the Thai QR code standard. The first thing that we learned that we make the right decision that using EMV code at our standard specification, because it gives us a lot of flexibility when we would like to introduce a lot of field, a lot of condition from both the financial and non-financial sector. With that standard, it's quite easy to make everyone understand what we can do with the QR code. In the beginning, a lot of bank or some member think that with the standard it will make other party less innovative. So why we have to stick to the standard? Why we cannot have the innovative thing of using QR code? But with the EMV code standard, we can facilitate that innovative idea. So we have another tag ID for bank or whatever to do the innovative thing, but still under the same QR code. Okay, that is the most important one. Right. You can do the innovative thing under the same QR code. Another thing that Kun Buncha mentioned is governance. Since this is a new one, and a lot of banks or that come together thinking of QR code as a competitive advantage for their own product and service. So if we don't have the good governance, we're not going to have a standard that can be shared or be used for both bank and non-bank. Okay, with the good governance from Bank of Thailand, from the TBA, Thai Banking Association, so that we be able to come up with the common standard. It takes time, a lot of meeting, a lot of discussion about pro and con of doing, putting in each field on the specification. Also, the thing that we think that we make a mistake is the use cases. At first, we thought that the QR code going to be used just for a simple payment, on top of the Pompeii infrastructure. So we not look at the whole scenario. So when we implement the QR code, we come up with the different expectation and a lot of questions why we cannot do this, why we cannot do that, because we quite have time limit. This is also that we cannot cater for all the use cases. That's why we still have a work going on to improve our Thailand QR code. So our QR code not just issue and stop, we still evolve, we still cater for the new requirement and new functionality that will keep coming up. Okay. Another thing is sandbox. At first, all the bank think the sandbox is the thing that is a barrier between our service and the customer. Why we need to go to the sandbox? Why cannot we go and do the pilot test with our customer and roll out? And it proved to be a good thing that we have sandbox, because this is a new thing. This involves a lot of party. We cannot go out there with each party misinterpret the specification. We have certain case that even same field, one bank interpret something, another bank interpret something. When we test it together, it work for one bank, might not work for another bank. This is a good thing about sandbox. That
Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much.
Issue. Okay, and also in the sandbox, we don't have to ask another permission to launch this digital product. So it's faster. At the end, it's faster for us to run this QR code. Another thing is that quite surprised me is that we don't know that this Thailand QR code, we actually create the new payment ecosystem.
That's right. That's right.
In the old day, we might think the payment ecosystem is more on the card payment. So the card payment, you have the issuer, You have the card holder, you have the merchant, and you have the acquirer. This is the payment, card payment ecosystem. But when we go to the QR code payment, we have no more issuing. We have issuing or acquiring. Everyone can be issuing. Everyone can be the acquiring. Acquiring doesn't have to be the bank. Issuing don't have to be the bank. In the card industry or in the card ecosystem, most of the bank are the issuer and acquirer of the card. So this open up the new front end to FinTech. So FinTech can easily come in and use their wallet at the issuer, to issue the QR code, even the accept the QR code. And also quite surprised later on that in the old day, the bank are the one that own the EDC, and bank will install the EDC to the merchant. But with the QR code, the merchant don't need the EDC. The merchant have creative idea to accept the QR code on their system. Certain merchant, they say that, I create my own QR code on my point of sale, on my vending machine, just like that. You don't need the bank, you just can do it. So it's an innovative way to use the QR code on both, issuing and acquiring. And this is going to be a lot of work in the future, that how we can enhance this new payment ecosystem, so we can have the low cost for the retail payment. And also, the QR code is not just for the retail. You can use the QR code for the B2B as well, because since it's built on top of the Pompeii, and Pompeii you can do the B2B transfer, you can do the bill payment from C2B. Same thing for the QR code, you can do that. Okay.
Thank you. So let me jump back over there. I see it. Yeah. Hi, still there, right? Still with us? Okay. This is a question from the floor here. They're just wondering, right? How do we actually promote the interoperability? So let me ask, from the global view, what have you seen in terms of the interoperability and standardizations, and how things are being promoted? So maybe from the technology standpoint first, and then from the business standpoint.
I mean, so at the end of the day, the way that the standards that are being put forth are coming to light are through all sorts of API portals, interoperability portals. We see a lot of innovation happening around startups and fintechs, and we see a lot of focus on hackathons. And hackathons are great, in my opinion, if at the end of the day they lead to bringing something to market, right? One of the challenges that we see is we see a lot of hackathons that end with a marketing message without actually bringing things to market, right? And I think it's a great way to show everyone what is possible, but we also need to make sure there's a lot more investment in bringing those innovative ideas actually to market and benefiting people. So those are ways that people are really spreading what APIs are available, what standards are available, and things of that nature.
And I think in terms of the growth of standards and interoperability, obviously regulators in each market play a huge role. We've talked a lot about QR, EMVCo QR today, and it's not just being embraced in Thailand. This is the same standard that has been embraced in India and is spreading to a number of other markets across Southeast Asia and East Asia as well. And this is being driven predominantly by the regulators in each market who are establishing the standards and encouraging the parties to come together as collaborators. Because I think it's important, and I think most of the parties realize now that it's important that we win as an industry. whether it's the regulator, the issuers, the banks, the merchants, and the consumers, that we win as an industry, and then as our individual selves, we can win within the industry and continue to compete. But having standards really helps us compete against the common enemy, and the common enemy is cash at the end of the day. I don't think anybody in this room really wants to see cash be resurgent and win in the war of payments. After all, cash is obscure, it is difficult to track and trace, it is expensive to manage cash, and electronic payments promote transparency, they're usually cheaper to manage and cheaper to deploy, and that's why, in effect, they're winning. And in Thailand, I believe 85% of transactions are still in cash. So there is a large headroom for the industry overall to grow. So I think it's important that everybody comes together to achieve that objective. And I think most parties are realizing that, yeah, let's do that. Let's enforce standards and interoperability, whether it be at a domestic level or increasingly important at a cross-border international level. As the world becomes more mobile and we have more Thais traveling, I was just in Niseko last week skiing, and there was a lot of Thais in Niseko, and a lot of them were obviously enjoying it, but also shopping and buying things, particularly warm clothing, I will add, to keep themselves warm. And promoting this level of interoperability at a global level is very important too.
Great. So I think we're running out of time. So let me closing this out by asking the panels for one last thought. So this session has all been about interoperability and standardization. We've talked, we've heard from the regulators of Thailand to discuss that there's a lot of work being done. So I think the initial question was, is this something that would help promote innovation and help to differentiate ongoing innovation within the industry? So with the standardization and interop, would this, your final thought is, would this help? Would this defer innovation?
All right, that probably have to answer that question because we are being pushed to standard, all right? And thank you very much. I just like to touch a little bit that the standard doesn't mean no innovation at all. The standard is just make sure that all of the flow, all of the field, for example, like a QR code, we come together, we set out the same standard, and we dedicate some field for open innovations. Each bank, each non-bank, they can use that field for their own innovations products or even their own innovation schemes, but we're still using the same standards. That's the key. So we have to ensure that everyone, every participant, they come and sit together like industry standards. So everyone bring in the innovation, come into put this in standard that everyone acceptable, and this is open. It can be open infrastructure and drive the whole economy moving into the right direction.
Okay.
To me, I think the concept that we have to collaborate first and compete later, both between the bank and between the FinTech, Otherwise, with the whatever you do is so innovative, but it cannot be widely used. It doesn't help Thailand, And also we should build up from the small community to the larger one, to the larger community. So I think that's why we always come up with the open standard and interoperability.
I would have to say that open standards nearly always promote more innovation. If we look at the history of technology and digital in the last 20 years, we will see that it's open standards that nearly always win in the end over closed environments. So,
Great.
Clearly, open standards are what's going to drive innovation, right? If we take a look, imagine if in order to buy a certain brand of refrigerator, I had to make sure that I was buying electricity from this company or that company, right? And so what those standards are going to do is level the playing field set a baseline, and then enable organizations to do wild innovation that will really focus on the needs of consumers, the needs of SMEs, the needs of corporates, and be able to then go across borders and address the needs of the future, AEC cooperation as well.
Great. So with that, I have one last question for the regulator here. There was a question from the floor. When will we get the open API? Regulator.
Oh, man.
I didn't. It was on here.
All right. I expect that kind of question anyway. I just want to touch upon our panelists' thought that absolutely the API is a key for connecting the system efficiently and effectively, that's for sure. Before we get into the open API standard, we have to make sure that we got the standardized industry first. We have to make sure industry, they got their own standard first. And later on, when we move to that step, to the open API standard, so that everything, at least 4 things have to be, make sure, because if we have to introduce something that's quite uncertain, it's gonna jeopardize all the system that we built. The first thing is the security. We have to make sure that the open standard is follow the international security standard. The second, we have to make sure that all the data have been protected, all the privacy data have been protected, so that the logics or the principles of anonymization data have to come in place. The third one, we have to make sure that all governance, all business rule has been put in place. And the fourth one, the consumer protections. We have to make sure that all of consumer right of data, all the consumer right or literacy has been in place. If those kind of 4 factors have been in place, so let's talk about open API.
Thank you. So with that, I'll close this session. Thank you, our panelists, and thank you, audience, for being kind enough to not fall asleep during our session. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, all the panelists. It was a fun conversation. Impressively, that they did a great job, right, to make the standards and interop very interesting, because normally this kind of stuff is less interesting. I'm not saying this boring, but they are showing that with the real use cases, and some of them that can be seen on the exhibition booth downstairs on the 1st and 2nd floors.
ครับขอขอบพระคุณผู้ร่วมเสวนาทุกท่านนะครับที่มาร่วมแบ่งปันข้อมูลเชิงลึกรวมถึง use case ที่น่าสนใจต่างๆครับซึ่ง use case เหล่านั้นครับท่านสามารถจะพบได้อยู่ในนิทรรศการบริเวณชั้น 1 และชั้น 2 ในบางตัวอย่างด้วยครับแล้วกลับมาพบกันอีกครั้งนะครับในเวลา 15:20 น.ครับ
So let's take a short break and we'll come back for the last but not least session of today's events at 3:20?
Yes.
All right, we'll get back here again at 3:20. Thank you.